All right, if you would turn your songbooks one more time to song number 53. Song number 53, The Love of God.
And yet another great song. This is good. Thank you. All right, let's see. 1 Kings tonight, chapter 9. Chapter number 9. All right. All right, we left off last week in chapter 8. We took a couple weeks for chapter 8. And we looked at Solomon's prayer of dedication, which was reaching out to the Lord on behalf of the nation. And so what will happen in chapter 9 is the Lord will respond. He'll answer, and then it'll get into just a few other things in the chapter, some of the building that's going on here as well with Solomon. So we'll get right into it here. Chapter number 9, and it says here in verse 1, "And it came to pass, when Solomon had finished the building of the house of the Lord and the king's house, and all Solomon's desire which he was pleased to do." And that's a lot of years, and it's a lot of building. But it looks like he had the priority in order. He built the house of the Lord first, and then he took care of his own. If you've learned anything in Christianity, always take care of God's things first. And the reason is, He'll bless you for that, okay? The Bible talks about giving God the first fruits. All right, the first fruits were the first things that popped up in the harvest, and they belong to God. You always take care of Him first. Now, He doesn't need anything, but it's based on your heart and your desire to take care of spiritual things. We know that from Matthew chapter 6. I mean, there's a very famous verse, right? Verse 33, "But seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you," which is interesting in the chapter, there. You are talking about physical things, but he's talking about take care of God's kingdom first and spiritual things like righteousness, and then things will be added unto you. And God always comes through for that. But we talk about verses that say, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Again, putting him first in your own home, in your own house. The Lord has to build that, right? And then I want you to turn to, this is really pronounced in the book of Haggai, if you can find Haggai, Old Testament prophet, toward the end of the Old Testament. So the last three books, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. All right, so those last three books are what are called post-captivity prophets after the Babylonian captivity. But in Haggai 1, it's a very simple concept here that the Lord is talking about, because he's going to rebuild his house. And he just says this. The word in verse 3 comes of the Lord by Haggai the prophet. Is it time for you, O ye, to dwell in your sealed houses, and this house, God's house, lie waste? Now therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Your ways are this. When you don't put God first, here's what's happening. You have sown much and bring in little. You eat, but you have not enough. You drink, but you're not filled with drink. You clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it into a bag with holes. And I always tell people that don't take care of the Lord's business first. You are putting your money in a bag of holes. It is just going bye-bye, all right, when you don't take care of the things of the Lord. And so he just tells them there to consider your ways, go to the mountain, verse 8, bring wood, build the house. I'll take pleasure in it. I'll be glorified, saith the Lord. So there's more of that to say in that chapter, but that's the principle of seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you, doing things for the Lord first. So Solomon did do this right, in that he built the house. I think it took him 7 years to build the house of the Lord. And then he built his house. He built other houses after that. All right. Verse number 2, it says that the Lord appeared to Solomon the second time as he appeared unto him at Gibeon. All right. So Solomon finishes the house, prays, dedicates it. And the Lord decides to appear unto him the second time. Okay, now it's interesting that Solomon was given 2 appearances, and David, his father, a man after God's own heart, a lot of good things said about David. The Lord only appeared to David one time. And it was not for anything good. It was for judgment. Okay, so to have God not only appear to Solomon one time when he said, "Ask what I should give thee, and I'll give it to you," and then the second time here is a great privilege. But in the verses talking about David, it says this is when David numbered the people, and God wasn't pleased there and brought a plague. And it says, when the angel stretched out his hand upon Jerusalem to destroy it, the Lord repented him of the evil and said to the angel that destroyed the people, "It is enough, stay now thine hand." And the angel of the Lord was by the threshing place of Araunah, the Jebusite. And David spake unto the Lord when he saw the angel that smote the people, and said, "Lo, I have sinned, and I have done wickedly." All right, so that's the one time David really was, the Lord appeared unto him. 2 Chronicles 3 reviews that. Says, then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord at Jerusalem in Mount Moriah, where the Lord appeared to David his father. That was the one time. In the place that David had prepared in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. All right, so it's just interesting, I think, that Solomon gets, 2 appearances. Verse number 3 says, And the Lord said unto him, I have heard thy prayer and thy supplication. This is everything what we talked about last week, that whole prayer for the nation. And he says, I've heard it, and that thou hast made before me. I have hallowed this house, made it holy, which thou hast built, to put my name there forever. And mine eyes and mine heart shall be there perpetually. Now I like this. This is an interesting verse because this is where the temple was. And the temple is going to be destroyed. Right? It's going to be several temples and they're all going to be destroyed. But God says, this is the place that I've put my name forever. So even right now, over there in Jerusalem, as they fight over these places, the Lord's like, nah, I put my name there. This is mine. Okay? Mine eyes and mine heart shall be there perpetually. I mean, we might be in the church age, we are in the church age, dealing with the church and the Gentiles, but God does not take his eyes off of Israel. They may not be the center of the program, but he hasn't forgotten them. He knows what's going on over there. Mine eyes and my heart shall be there perpetually. And to cross-reference some of these other verses about God's name there, Exodus 20:24 says, And an altar of earth thou shalt make unto me, and shall sacrifice thereon thy burnt offerings and thy peace offerings, thy sheep and thine oxen. In all places where I record my name, I will come unto thee, and I will bless thee. So the Lord takes claim, and there are places where he records his name. One of them, 2 Chronicles 6:6, But I have chosen Jerusalem, that my name might be there, and have chosen David to be over my people Israel. I've chosen Jerusalem. My name is going to be there. 2 Chronicles 12:13, talking about King Rehoboam. He reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. So Jerusalem is the holy city. Mount Moriah, we've talked about that and the significant things that have happened there. That's where God has put his name. Okay? That's why it's, the day is coming when the enemies are not going to fare well, enemies of Israel, enemies of Jerusalem. And that's why in Daniel 9, we talk about the prophecy, there's a large prophecy there, Daniel 70 weeks. In Daniel chapter 9, it talks about this prophecy being upon thy people and thy holy city. That prophecy is centered around Jerusalem, okay? Around the Jews and around Jerusalem, on thy holy city. Why? Because that's where God's name is, okay? And so he says it way back here at the dedication of the temple. I've hallowed it, and I've put my name there forever, okay? And God's name is still there, whether it's in the ruins or whatever. That's where God's name is, okay? All right, so verse number 4, And if thou wilt walk before me as David thy father walked, in integrity of heart and in uprightness, to do according to all that I have commanded thee, and will keep my statutes and my judgments. So we stop in verse 4 because he tells Solomon, basically, you need to walk as David thy father walked. Now, he wasn't perfect, we know that. He made some mistakes, we know that. But God said he walked in integrity of heart and in uprightness. One of the things about David was when he sinned, he didn't stay there long, he had a good relationship with the Lord and wanted to be restored and would get back up on his feet. So one of those things that God even says in 1 Kings 15:5, he says, because David did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord and turned not aside from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, save only in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. Now, that's according to God's perspective. There were a lot of different things where David could have gone wrong or it could have been held against him. But he says, you know what? He did all right overall except for the matter of Bathsheba's husband Uriah the Hittite when he had him killed and all that. Okay, he didn't dig that one. That wasn't one that he let slide by. Okay. But otherwise, he pretty much cleaned the slate there for David. And he could have said more. He doesn't mention the numbering of the people or any of the other things. All right, so we have there the integrity of the heart. He wants them to walk. He tells them, follow the example that your father had. To keep my statutes and my judgments. Verse number 5. Then, he says to Solomon, then I will establish the throne of thy kingdom upon Israel forever. As I promised to David thy father, saying, there shall not fail thee a man upon the throne of Israel. No, and again, all the kings that came from David all came from, his loins, if you will, and down through there. As long as there was a king, they were related to David, especially in when they split, when the two southern tribes. But that was important. So we're going to take a moment here to talk about that kingdom, that Davidic kingdom promised to Israel, promised to David, that throne would last forever. And it will, because we're talking about the throne of thy kingdom. We're talking about, again, Christ's kingdom on earth. You got to really grasp that and understand it. Don't underestimate the coming kingdom, what we call the millennial reign of Jesus Christ, okay? Not something to take lightly, all right? So, because God doesn't, because He established it, and He establishes it forever. And so here's some verses just to review what we're talking about when we talk about that kingdom. In Matthew chapter 19, it says, and Jesus said unto them, verily I say unto you, that ye which have followed me in the regeneration of the earth, in the regeneration when the Son of Man shall sit in the throne of His glory, ye also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Now this is the millennial reign of Christ. This is His kingdom on earth. It has a Jewish flavor to it, but it is for the world as well. But He says to the apostles that they would sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes. That's going to be an interesting piece of that 1,000-year kingdom on earth. Matthew 25:31, when the Son of Man shall come in His glory, and all the holy angels with Him, then shall He sit upon the throne of His glory. Again, when He returns the second time, the second coming of Jesus Christ, He sets up a throne, the throne of His glory, the kingdom on earth, also called in Matthew the kingdom of heaven. Luke chapter 1 verse 32 says, speaking of Christ, He shall be great and shall be called the Son of the Highest. And the Lord shall give unto Him, that's Jesus, the throne of His father David. And He shall reign over the house of Jacob forever. All right? And of His kingdom there shall be no end. All right? So He's gonna, the throne of His father David, the Davidic kingdom, reign over the house of Jacob. Up there. There they are. Okay? Reign over the house of Jacob, and of His kingdom there shall be no end. Which is true, because when it comes, it's during the 1,000-year reign, and then after that is pretty much just off into eternity. All right? So those are just some verses that talk about his kingdom. This is the Davidic covenant, what we call the Davidic covenant, the covenant of David. Way back here, we're talking about in Solomon's time frame. All right, so then remember this prayer, kingdom prayer, Matthew 6, right? Kingdom prayer. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. We all know that. We were all taught that, right? Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. On earth as in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts, we forgive our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. One of the things we never did as Catholics, when we were taught this, added, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. We would say, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And that, any of you other Catholics remember that? And then, period. You know what they left out? For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. That's this kingdom we're talking about. His kingdom forever. Okay? Now, it is a very Catholic teaching. And Catholic manuscripts, Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, those manuscripts that produced the what we call newer Bibles after the King James, they have very Catholic-y renderings. Okay? And that's why what you see here is in the NIV, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. First of all, that's wrong. He didn't say deliver us from the evil one. He said deliver us from evil, because that can come from all sorts of places, not just the evil one, right? But the other thing is, they left out, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. They left that kingdom. You know why? Because that's Catholicism. Believe me, I was there. I was taught it. And those are Catholic manuscripts. You got to remember, anything that's not King James Bible is from a Catholic manuscript. That's a fact. Vaticanus, Vatican, Sinaiticus, Sinai. Okay? ESV, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Period. No kingdom. Okay? How come? How come? Because there's a teaching that Jesus is not literally coming to reign, and that's Catholicism and other liberal theologians. And you have these types of teachings right here. You have premillennialism, postmillennialism, and amillennialism. All right? Premillennialism, that's what we would be. Whenever people ask you, are you pre? Yeah, we're pre. Because they'll say, are you pre-trib? We're pre-trib. Are you premillennial? We're premillennial. You're pre. All right? That's the right. Premillennialism says Jesus returns before his 1,000-year kingdom. He ushers it in and sets it up. I mean, doesn't that make sense? It's his kingdom. He comes back and he sets up the kingdom. Okay? Post-millennialism, which is, again, more of the liberal theologian approach, would say Jesus returns after the 1,000 years, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Why would he return after? He's here reigning. It's his kingdom. Amillennialism, which is when you take out, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory, and this teaching is there is no 1,000-year kingdom. That's all figurative. Okay? That's what that's talking about. Means no. All right, amusement park, amusement. You're not musing, you're not thinking. All right, there's no amusement. That's what that means. You're not musing. You're just sitting back enjoying the roller coaster ride. All right, so means no. Millennialism. There's no 1,000-year reign. Okay. All right, so those are the teachings. You're premillennial. at least I am in this church is. I can't say every one of you are, but that's what our camp is. And it goes something like this. Isn't drawn to scale, obviously. You have 4,000 years of Old Testament history, then the cross. Okay? Jesus came, died on the cross after 4,000 years. This is where we are now in that window of the 2,000-year New Testament. Okay? And this era ends at this arrow. That's called the rapture. And the rapture's before the tribulation, making it a pre-tribulation rapture. Okay? Now some people say, well, I think it's in the middle. Some people think it's in post. But no. All right. Pre-tribulation rapture. Then you have a 7-year tribulation. The arrow coming down is the second coming of Jesus Christ, where he touches down on the earth, where he splits the Mount of Olives in two, where every eye shall see him. All right, he comes back, and then he sets up the 1,000-year millennium, his kingdom. So he comes back before or pre-millennial. All right, pre-millennial. All right. So that's the 1,000-year kingdom on earth, again, referred to as here. We saw the verses in Matthew and in Luke. We see the verses here, the promise of the Davidic kingdom in 1 Kings 9. There shall not fail thee a man upon the throne of Israel. All right, so for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory, or the kingdom of heaven that Jesus would talk about in Matthew. That's what that is as well, the kingdom of heaven. All right, so that's his kingdom. All right, so that's what we're talking about when we talk about all of this kingdom. Because when we're studying Solomon's kingdom, which is a picture or type of the millennial reign of Christ. Now, it won't be long here. It's going to flip. In a couple chapters, Solomon's going to go downhill because he's a man, right? But up to this point, this is his kingdom, the expanse of it, and what God gave him, pictured as Solomon is son of David, Jesus is son of David, pictures the kingdom of Christ. Okay? All right. So, when it's omitted from other Bibles, it's because those authors and those influencers do not believe in a literal kingdom. Otherwise, why would you strike it? Why would you take it out? It doesn't make any sense. Why would you take for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory out? What advantage would that be? Okay. Verse 6, but if ye shall at all turn from following me, ye or your children, and will not keep my commandments and my statutes, which I have set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them. He warns them. Solomon, if you do this, if you turn from this, or your kids, here's what's going to happen. Then will I cut off Israel out of the land which I have given them, and this house which I have hallowed for my name, and I will cast out of my sight. And Israel shall be a proverb and a byword among all people. Which at this point, if you were sitting here when this was said, and you would see the great kingdom there, you wouldn't believe that Israel could ever become a byword of afterthought, a proverb, okay? And he says, then I will cast Israel out of my sight. I will cut off Israel out of the land. And this house being the temple, okay? And this house, and by the way, the temple would be destroyed 3 times, okay? So this temple that we're talking about was the first one, and that was destroyed by the Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar. In the Babylonian captivity, they took Israel over to Babylon for 70 years, and they destroyed the temple. Then it was rebuilt. Ezra, Zerubbabel right? Nehemiah, those guys rebuilt it. And during the 400 silent years, it was destroyed again by a fellow named Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay? He also destroyed the temple. Then it was rebuilt, they call it by Herod's temple, and that was destroyed in 70 A.D. by General Titus of the Roman armies. So 3 times up, 3 times down. All right, the next one's permanent. All right, because that's Christ. All right, that's when He sets up. All right, verse number 8 of our text, 1 Kings chapter number 9, verse 8. And at this house, which is high, everyone that passeth by it shall be astonished and shall hiss, and they shall say, Why hath the Lord done thus unto this land and to this house? They'll be like, what had happened to this? Why would the Lord allow this? I can't believe this has happened. You know, it's just something that we never could have imagined. In verse 9 it says, And they shall answer, because they forsook the Lord their God, who brought forth their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and have taken hold upon other gods, and have worshipped them, and served them. Therefore hath the Lord brought upon them all this evil, because it's what He said He would do, and they did what He told them not to do, and therefore He did what He said He was going to do, and that's what happened. All right? In fact, later on in Jeremiah chapter 40, this is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord after that Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, had let him go from Ramah, when he had taken him being bound in chains among all that were carried away captive of Jerusalem and Judah, which were carried away captive unto Babylon. And the captain of the guard took Jeremiah and said unto him, The Lord thy God hath pronounced this evil upon this place. Now the Lord hath brought it, and done according as He hath said, because ye have sinned against the Lord, and have not obeyed His voice. Therefore this thing is come upon you. My goodness, folks, this is just such a true principle all the way through the Bible. If you do this, I will do this. And if it's obedience, if you obey, I'll bless you. If you disobey, I won't bless you. If you sin, there's going to be consequences. Isn't that just the way the Lord works? Right? It's just the way the Lord works. Pronounces judgment, on the nation, on Israel. And that's what He's warning Solomon here. Fair and square, Solomon, if you stray, if you guys disobey, if you serve other gods, then this is going to be a problem. Well, it's exactly what happened. And the people will say, why did God do this? Well, this is why. All right, verse number 10 of our text, it says, And it came to pass at the end of 20 years, when Solomon had built the 2 houses, the house of the Lord and the king's house. Now Hiram, the king of Tyre, had furnished Solomon with cedar trees and fir trees and with gold, according to all his desire, that then King Solomon gave Hiram 20 cities in the land of Galilee. Now this is the start of something bad. Solomon gave a pagan king 20 cities. And that was a violation of the Abrahamic and Palestinian covenant. You don't give that land away to anybody. Now today we see the same thing with the talk of the Palestinian state. Man, I'm always like, don't give in, Israel. Don't give them any. Don't get. I always hate when our presidents are like, oh, we'll see, maybe they could give a little bit, to the Palestinians. No, don't talk like that, man. God's name is over there. His eyes are over there. His ears are over there. He doesn't like that. He doesn't like that. In fact, I don't have it fresh. It just popped into my mind. But there's history when our presidents have been part of that. Clinton was one of them. Part of giving that stuff away, that like natural disasters hit our country. God doesn't like that stuff, man. Don't mess with that land. Don't give it away. It's Israel's. It's God's, really. So you hear things like, remember ISIS? Remember that? And all the trouble that they caused? And they're the Islamic State of Israel and Syria. That's what ISIS stood for. Islamic State of, not Israel, I'm sorry. The Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. And they caused a lot of problems, and we can't get rid of them. And Obama said we can't get rid of them, and we can't get rid of them. And then Trump got rid of them in days, remember? You don't hear. Why? Obama didn't want to get rid of them. And Obama, if you remember, Barack Obama never said ISIS. He called them ISIL. ISIL, not ISIS, because he didn't see them as the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. He saw them as the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, Levant. Levant includes nations, the region, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and Palestine. So whenever Barack Obama said ISIL, what he was saying is the land belongs to the Muslims. That's what he was saying. ISIL, Levant. Israel belongs to the Arabs. That's what that's what his code was. No wonder why he never got rid of ISIL. Not Donald Trump, though. He came in and he wiped them out pretty good. Okay? Interesting stuff. Don't give away the land. Solomon, this is the start of his downfall. Giving away 20 cities. No. Verse 12, and Hiram came out from Tyre to see the cities which Solomon had given him, and they pleased him not. And he said, what cities are these which thou hast given me, my brother? And he called them the land of Kabul unto this day. He didn't like them. And Hiram sent to the king 60 talents of gold, which isn't much for 20 cities. I think he's in a dispute here, all right? But the point is, tells us he gave them away. Let him have them. Verse 15. And this is the reason of the levy, or the taxes, which King Solomon raised, for to build the house of the Lord, and his own house, in Millo, and the wall of Jerusalem, and Hazor, and Megiddo, and Gezer. For Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had gone up and taken Gezer, and burnt it with fire, and slain the Canaanites that dwelt in the city, and given it for a present unto his daughter, Solomon's wife. And Solomon built Gezer, and Beth-horon, and Nether, and Baalath, and Tadmor, and the wilderness, and the land. And all the cities of store that Solomon had, and cities for his chariots, and cities for his horsemen, and that which Solomon desired to build in Jerusalem, and in Lebanon, and all the land of his dominion. Now, verse number 20, it says, and all the people that were left of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, which were not of the children of Israel. They were left in the land, and it was a sin to leave them there. And again, you can just see, you're starting to see the downfall of Solomon. All right, giving the cities, letting Hiram take the cities, leaving these people in the land. Okay, so basically, you have, which we'll get to later, 1 Kings 11, but King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites. Of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, you shall not go into them, neither shall they come in unto you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love. And again, when God says something, mark it down. Because this is exactly what happened to Solomon. He started to love the women, and then they turned his heart toward their gods, and then it became just kind of a whole pagan fest. All right, but in verse 20, we're talking about here, they left him there. They shouldn't have even left him there. Now, verse 21, their children that were left after them in the land, whom the children of Israel also were not able to utterly destroy, upon those does Solomon levy a tribute of bond service unto this day. they became kind of in bondage, they became slaves, servants. It didn't matter. Their presence was still there. That was the issue. But of the children of Israel did Solomon make no bondmen, but they were men of war, and his servants and his princes and his captains and his rulers of his chariots and his horsemen. So Solomon made the pagans slaves, but not his own people. Verse 23, these were the chief of the officers that were over Solomon's work, 550, which bear rule over the work, over the people that wrought in the work. But Pharaoh's daughter came up out of the city of David under her house, which Solomon had built for her. Then did he build Millo. And 3 times in a year did Solomon offer burnt offerings and peace offerings upon the altar which he built unto the Lord, and he burnt incense upon the altar that was before the Lord, so he finished the house. And again, nobody starts thinking they're going to become pagan. Nobody thinks they're going to turn their hearts away from God. Nobody thinks that they're going to marry, into pagan goddesses and all that. Solomon is, again, he's been given, God warned him in the chapter, just stay the course, do what your father did, don't stray away. I mean, one thing David never did, in all of David's faults, he never went after strange gods. He never turned his heart from the Lord after pagan gods. So, Solomon, in fact, and you see him again as a type of Jesus Christ, he's offering burnt offerings, he's prophesied, and he's the king. So Solomon was allowed to do something very rare of a king. He was allowed to act in the priest's office, which offered the offerings, the burnt offerings. That was a big deal. To my knowledge, David and Jesus are the only other ones allowed to be what's called prophet, priest, and king. Jesus, David, Solomon. They prophesied, they were prophets. They offered sacrifices, burnt offerings, they were in the priest's office, and of course king. Prophet, priest, and king. Because if you remember, when King Saul was king and he offered some offerings and sacrifices before Samuel the prophet got there, God was none too pleased with that because he intruded on the priest's office. And God said, you're done. You're out. That's it. You can't do that. Prophet, priest, king, those 3-in-1 offices are reserved for Jesus Christ, and then David, and then the other son of David, Solomon. They're all kind of tied into that Davidic kingdom. Okay? Those 3. No one else was allowed to do that. Prophet, priest, and king. All right, so he didn't do anything wrong when he did this here. What I'm saying is he's off. God gave him a good start and a good kingdom and instructions and everything that he needed to be successful. All right, now think about it this way: man is man. In the millennial reign of Christ, that 1,000-year kingdom of really peace and perfection, Satan is bound up for 1,000. He's chained for 1,000 years. The demons are withheld for 1,000 years. And you and I, presumably, are there doing some kind of service or reign in that kingdom in our perfect heavenly bodies. But there are survivors from the tribulation who are human beings. They're still in their human bodies. And that kingdom is going to allow them to live. You're going to go back to like garden rules. They're going to live hundreds and hundreds of years old. But at the end of the 1,000 years, when Satan is loosed, he finds rebellious people against Christ and that perfect kingdom. Isn't that something? He can still find. You know who man's worst opponent is? Himself. Oh, the devil made me do it. The devil's chained up for 1,000 years. And you still rebelled against Christ. That should teach us something. That should teach us something about humanity, about ourselves. All right? And nobody else's fault if I go after and sin and, all that stuff. So, again, same type of thing, type of the millennial reign. Perfection, but man is man. Man is man. And then Solomon, his heart's just going to turn away. It starts with his weakness, whatever his weak spot was, women. Women were his weak spot. And those women introduced him to pagan gods. And he went after them. And that turned his heart away from the Lord. All right, so we'll finish the chapter here. So he finished the house, verse 25. And King Solomon made a navy of ships in Ezion Geber, which is beside Eloth on the shore of the Red Sea, in the land of Edom. And Hiram sent in the navy his servants, shipmen that had knowledge of the sea, with the servants of Solomon. And they came to Ophir and fetched from thence gold and 420 talents and brought it to King Solomon. So he's got it going on there in this kingdom. Riches, anything, riches, wealth, fame, anything that the guy could ever have wanted. And starting off with how to have a good relationship with the Lord, who appeared unto him twice. And his father only once. Appeared unto Solomon twice. And yet he still messed up. So anyway, so that's the end of chapter 9. Let's see, it's 10 after, so we're doing good for time. And next week, we're going to see the Queen of Sheba in her visit to Solomon. And Jesus actually referenced this visit as well in Matthew chapter 12. This is a big deal, okay? It's a big deal, this visit. It gives you a taste of what's going on at the time in the kingdom. So, all right, I got time. All right, so if you have any questions or comments, you may ask. Nothing. All right. Either a very good teacher or a very bad one. So it's one of those two. All right. So, all right. So that's it for chapter 9. So let me pray. You got, like I said, it's only 10 after, so you got plenty of time. Don't rush Awana. Mike gets mad. All right. But just hang in fellowship and then when it's time to pick up the kids, you go ahead and do that. All right. Father, thank you for Jesus tonight. Thank you for the Word of God and for the lessons that we could learn, good and bad. I pray that we could just apply those in any way, Lord, that would help us as we look back and learn from thousands of years ago how you are still you're still you, and your principles. Lord, just never end, and they're the same. And I pray that we could just continue to be obedient, follow you, not stray from you, and keep our mind on you, keep our heart towards you. And we thank you for that now. We ask you to bless the rest of our evening tonight in Jesus' name. Amen.